So, are we ready for feminine energy to take over? When I say feminine energy, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? What do you think we're going to talk about? No. What I'm referring to is feminine energy. Well, maybe yes. I don't know. Maybe we're on the same wavelength. But for me, feminine energy, we're talking about how the duality within us. We all carry masculine and feminine energy, regardless of your gender identification, expression, orientation, etc. And we have been living in a system for some time now that has voluntarily and directly chosen to disconnect the two and cause a imbalance between the two, and causing feminine energy to be heavily disrespected, suppressed, suffocated, distorted, diluted, commodified, commercialized, etc. What does it look like if after all this time of this happening in this imbalance, feminine energy, with of course the help of the masculine energy, reclaims its power to bring that balance back? Are we prepared for that? Are we ready for that? Or do we want that? What do you think? Well, this is a topic we're talking about on an episode of the Curious and Cultured podcast hosted by me and my sister Damali. And in this episode, we reflect more on this notion of how feminine energy has been distorted in this way, and why we all, again, regardless of your gender, could really benefit from rebalancing that for ourselves individually, and then causing that ripple effect for that rebalancing to happen collectively. And then we also shift the scope a little bit to also speak directly about how feminine energy has been distorted in the realm of women. What is defined as elegant, what's defined as ladylike, what's defined as valued, and how a lot of that has continued to be distorted, and taking note that those definitions are very much focused or determined by Western ideologies, colonizer ideologies, puritanical hypocrisy ideologies that really don't serve anybody else, that truly creates restrictions that only benefit the oppressor. And so we have to be very careful and cognizant of what standards or definitions we're using for ourselves, or even what we're teaching other people. And not trying to necessarily offend those who are part of any of those groups that I just listed. Because maybe you yourself are not the problem, but historically speaking and currently, it's possible your image has been utilized to be the face of the problem. So we go into that in this episode. So if this resonates with you, you are interested in this topic, I do invite you and encourage you to check out this episode. The link is in my bio. It's also streaming wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, before we get into that, can we talk about my hair? I got braids. I am officially summertime fine because I got braids. And I will be playing around with them for the entire video. Or I will forget they are there and I will wonder why there's something crawling on my neck. Either one will probably happen, okay? But I got braids. And then we got cornrows and twists and curls. There is art. This is art, yes? Talk to me nice. Actually, you should have already sent me flowers, money, stocks in my name, chilled coconut water, confirmation for flight tickets, hotel accommodations, spa day accommodation, confirmations. But now it's too late because I had to tell you to send it to me, so I don't want it anymore. Take it back. Please be advised, I plan to be a complete menace for the entire duration of this hairstyle. Unapologetically irresistible and inconvenient. You're welcome. Oh, so if you are looking for somewhere to get your braids or hair done, you should definitely check out Tantale Styles Beauty Hub. That is where I got my hair done, and they definitely understand the assignment. Not to diss all the other hair salons in this wonderful city, but I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you're looking for quality, if you're looking for customer service, if you're looking for creative artistry, you're just looking for the right energy, you got to check them out. Okay. From the time of creating the appointment to going to the salon, I knew what to expect. They knew what to expect. The price did not change. The people did not change. There was no guessing games. Like, it was really a very pleasant experience for me. And again, do you see the artistry here? And my scalp was at peace for the entire process. So you should definitely check them out. They don't only do braids, they do other hair stuff too. They do other hair services too. You can come to their salon. They can also come to you, whichever you prefer. So yeah, I'll put their handle in the captions. You could check out their page. And then if you like this style and you want to know what do you need to search for on Pinterest to get your pictures, you need to use the words Fulani lemonade braids, lemonade Fulani braids, any combination of that, braids or twists. I did twists, and that will get you the photos that you need, because I got you. Yeah? Okay. I also need to remind you that, of course, I'm wearing jewelry from my boutique, Bangles Muse. These earrings are available. And then also we have these bangles, and you don't need to be as dramatic as me if you want in terms of stacking them. All of this, you can also just take two like that. And then we also have the bigger, bolder ones as well, available at bandelemuse.com. Link is in my bio. For right now, you and I wanted to chat with you about the dynamic of what it would look like when feminine energy reclaims its power in a way that's so, not necessarily bigger, but it's in a way that's more obvious to everyone, more tangible for everyone. And what this reminded me of is a show that I watched a few episodes of called The Power. And it's a sci-fi show based off of a book, I guess also a sci-fi book. I ended up not finishing the series. I know, I'm sorry. So if you've seen it, let me know how it ends, because I didn't finish it. Actually, I feel like I would possibly enjoy reading the book more than watching the show. But maybe that's just me. But anyways, the gist of it, because I didn't see the ending, so I won't be able to spoil it for you. But the gist of it is that there is a phenomenon happening in the story. The era it's in, it seems to be present time, or maybe slightly in the future, but it's not, it feels like it's something that could happen today or next year kind of thing. And there's a phenomenon happening where teenage girls all over the world are obtaining, as in they just wake up, obtaining a power where there's electricity coming out of their fingers. And initially, as it's happening, of course, the girls themselves are freaking out. Like, what? Like, they don't understand why they have it. And then gradually they're trying to learn how to use it, how to keep it under control, because it's very much connected to their emotions. As in, if they're very angry or something, they can like cause a lot to happen, possibly a lot of damage to happen. Now, as this starts spreading, of course, more and more people start talking about it. It goes viral because, of course, some people need to post it online that this is what they're doing. And then the story continues where you see how each country and government and people respond to this phenomenon. They discover that the reason why it's happening, there's some muscle in this area of their body that these generations of girls were born with, but it just was activated when they turned a certain age. So it's something that would have gone under the radar until right now. Now, you can only imagine what kind of responses ended up happening with these girls. Unfortunately, no country was happy about it. So you'll have instances where some countries are kidnapping or confiscating these girls and harvesting the muscle or thing in them that's causing it. You have other countries where they're putting them on lockdown in the schools and keeping them isolated or possibly trying to criminalize people who have it. And then the other thing they're able to do with it is that they can give this power to other women who are not teenagers. If they ask for it or want it, they can share it with them. So gradually, older women are also quietly getting the power, but keeping quiet about it, but having the power. And so the show has multiple main characters because we follow the story of each of these different people who don't know each other, at least for as far as I got. None of them know each other, but they're in their respective different countries dealing with this. And there was one particular scene I wanted to share with you in this. First, have you seen this show? Let me know. Have you seen it? There was one particular scene, and this was the characters that are in Africa. Because yes, the story did hit Africa. And they focused on two characters in Nigeria. And of course, the response for the electricity happening there was that these girls must be witches. And so initially the girls had to hide and practice their power secretly, because initially people, of course, were scared of it. Now, when this scene happens, it's now more readily, not necessarily is readily accepted, but it's now not a secret that women have it. And it's not only the teenagers, because other women have also volunteered to have this power. And in the scene, our two main characters in the Nigerian story, is a man and a woman, and it seems like they might have been in a relationship before, or they might have had feelings for each other before, but for whatever reason, they're not together. But you get the sense there's a mismatch of some kind where either one of them or both of them has just decided to continue fumbling the bag with this connection. So there's a little bit of a, slight hurt feelings always seems to come up when they interact. But what they have in common is that they're both into journalism and wanting to share important stories about people and voices that are not always heard. And so she is the one who finds this story first. She's the one who finds the girls that have this power. And he ends up being he takes the story and kind of runs with it and goes viral with it, when it originally was her story, which maybe is, I don't know if that's also part of the reason why they're not together like that. But he ends up having experiences where he is stationed. He goes to European country and a Middle Eastern country briefly, so that we can see his character witness how this power is influencing women. And for him and his character, it automatically clicks for him that this is a very good thing. So he's very much an advocate for women to have this power. So in this scene, both of our main characters in Nigeria are at a mutual friend's wedding. And the main character is with the groom. And they're in I don't know if it's a house or a hotel. And I don't think the groom has seen his bride yet for the festivities. And it's obvious that the groom he seems either upset or nervous or something. He's just not in the celebratory mood, even though he's in his tux and everything. And our main character first assumes that, oh, maybe he just has cold feet. So he's trying to talk to him. What's wrong? You're fine. Don't be nervous. Everyone's nervous on their big day. Something like that. And the groom continues to be in this mood of and he says something along the lines of, no, he's not nervous. He doesn't have cold feet. The problem is he just recently found out that his wife-to-be has the power. And our main character responds with, wow, that's amazing. He's so enthusiastic and happy for him. This is wonderful. Oh, this is going to be so great for both of you, etc., etc. And the groom still has this demeanor of my guy, why are you happy about this? And so our main character, which I'm forgetting his name. I need to find his name because he actually was a really good actor. You know how some actors can really embody the emotions and the character. So even though they haven't said anything yet, you completely feel and know where this character is going in the scene. So he was very good at that. So I hope he's I hope he's getting paid and hired for multiple projects because he's good. So he then responds like, oh, what do you mean? Like, why would that be a problem? And the groom is like, but how? He says something along the lines of, how could I have a wife with power? Like, how could I be the man of the house if my wife has power? What would my community think of me? What would my family think of me? Like, I could not possibly imagine what that would be like. It would be terrible. And you see how our main character shifts, as in like it clicks for him that even though this might have been his best friend up until this point, he is now realizing that, oh, we don't see this the same way. And so our main character says something along the lines of, he shares the experiences he had recently where he was documenting how this power is influencing, inspiring, and empowering women in other parts of the world who have been oppressed forever. And noting how this is amazing because of how much women have gone through. This will balance things back again, which is wonderful. And then the groom still is not happy and not convinced. And he says something along the lines of, okay, all of this that you're saying is fine. But then if that's the case, how do you know that when these women have this power, they won't turn around and treat us the way we have been treating them all this time? And I thought, I don't know if this is how the scene works in the book, but I thought in terms of how they did this in the show, I thought that was such a beautiful illustration of a aspect of a response to this dynamic. If feminine energy, and this was about women, but if feminine energy reclaimed its power fully, is this the type of response that it would have from everything and everyone else? Is this the threat that keeps us from allowing feminine energy to reclaim its power? And when you think about it, in the context of this scene, which not only I thought that was powerful just by, the dialogue I just shared, but when you also look at the characters, which I think now since being exposed to different perspectives, I felt it was even more powerful because these characters, the main character is not only Nigerian, but he's also Muslim. So he's an African Muslim man. And having him be the character who is advocating for this power and then having to deal with your friend who doesn't see how this would be a good thing, I thought was also even more powerful because it got me thinking of like my own, of how I think not only does that illustrate perceived threats as a response, but also illustrates that we all don't start from the same starting point. Like, you know how on a race, you're all supposed to start at the same line and then you go. But like, we're not all starting at the same line. So in this, there's multiple layers in that scene. There's multiple layers of these two people are not starting at the same starting point. That's why they can't see the same thing in the same way. And that got me thinking of like, well, if for me personally, my starting point allows me to see how wonderful it would be for feminine energy within ourselves, feminine energy collectively, and yes, marginalized people, whether that's a certain gender, but even if you broaden the scope, not just women reclaiming their power, broaden the scope, marginalized populations, oppressed populations, exploited populations. What if all of those populations regained its power? What would that look like? That would be quite a threat to the oppressor, would it not? On a grander scale, it's like, oh yeah, definitely puppet strings would be threatened. But then when you do it on the individual, of like you, an individual, have a wholesome balance within the duality of you. Who then is the oppressor that would be threatened by that? And what if that happens with somebody that you care about, or somebody that's supposed to be close to you, like in this scene with our main character and the groom? And a little, maybe a slight segue, because I'm also noting why it's important that the characters were what the characters were in this show, because I've now been exposed to there are differing perspectives about certain demographics in ways that I did not realize. So, for example, the fact that in this show, the main character is a Nigerian Muslim man. For me, my initial starting point was, okay, it is making a statement that you're having an African man advocate for something like this or say something like this, because the conditioning, I'm not saying all of this demographic is like this, but the conditioning has created a stereotype that this demographic would not have the capacity to see the value of women having the power to have electricity coming out of their fingers. Like it would be difficult for that demographic. The stereotype is it will be difficult for that demographic. So it's like, wow, you will have this character doing that. That's a statement in itself. But then you add the religion part to it as well. That's another layer that is adding meaning to it too, depending on your starting point. Like for me, my starting point is the US reference of Black Muslims. For me, that's Farrakhan or Malcolm X. And regardless if you resonate or not, or regardless of what you think of what they stand for or stood for, have they ever, whatever they show up as, does it give the impression that they could not have the capacity to think like this, or to see the value of this, or to interact at that level? To me, I would say no. But then the fascinating thing, since coming here to Ghana, and I'm saying this, I don't mean any harm, don't mean any disrespect, but I have noticed a very different connotation about the stereotypes conditioning what you expect somebody of that demographic to have the capacity to think or do or accomplish, which for me was, and it still is, very surprising and confusing, because my starting point, there is no question that somebody from this demographic would be somebody who could have a conversation like this in this scene, or be somebody who lives in a big house like in this show, or be somebody who is educated like in this show. But then it seems, as I've observed, that here, and I don't know if this is also in the rest of the continent, but I've seen here in Ghana, like, that's not the automatic assumption. The starting point here is not Farrakhan. The starting point here is different, where sometimes the assumption is we're surprised because the only conditioned stereotype is for this demographic to only be somebody who would not have much. And so I don't know who was involved in the show, but I understand and see that there was layers of a messaging they were using to insist that we're going to have these characters have this type of conversation in this region with these characteristics. That's a big message there. Not sure if that's me always connecting dots and stuff, but I just felt like that is such a big deal, because I think that further illustrates how, like, I see the electricity coming from the fingers is I see it as the electricity is like the analogy or the metaphor for feminine energy reclaiming its power. And for it to be able to do that, there needs to be a collaboration involved, including the other side, which is masculine energy, as well as other people who have different types of privileges, must collaborate, have the capacity to be open-minded and think differently, to see the value in making sure feminine energy is no longer disrespected or suppressed or suffocated within us as individuals, regardless of your gender, as well as collectively. So what does that look like individually? Which we go in more on this episode, but I wanted to share a little bit with you in terms of, for me personally, I feel like even though, yes, obviously I show up here as a woman all the time, but I feel like now and for the past some years now, I've been more intentional about rebalancing that duality within myself. I think previously I did go through a phase of leaning more on my masculine energy side because what I was focused on and what I was conditioned to believe was of value. There was no space for my feminine energy to feel safe or even feel valued. And so it doesn't mean, and when I say leaning in from one to the other, it doesn't mean I change my gender. It doesn't mean changing the gender or changing the way you dress or anything like that. Yeah. It's more of like, oh, you're doing a lot more just doing more, chasing more. There's a lot more of external. Everything is external of you more. Well, the feminine is, for me, the feminine is more internal, more lean back and allow more flow to happen within the framework that the masculine energy provides, as opposed to just actually only working with the framework with nothing inside. Are we following? Are we following? And so I noted for me, which is why when it comes to what would it look like when feminine energy reclaims its power, and assuming that that would mean there'll be no wars, there'll be no destruction, there'll be no nothing, as if feminine energy could never throw hands. I feel like, again, that's part of the distortion. For me personally, when I started being more intentional of I'm wanting to rebalance this now, and where do I start from there? And as I was starting that process, which has a lot to do with like self-awareness work and journaling and meditating and a lot of questioning and disentangling and transforming, yes, I noted how my, like, almost the initial response from my feminine energy was this feeling of a real depth of anger and sadness. It wasn't anger and sadness over what happened today. It felt like a depth that was 12,000 years old. As in, it's not only carrying what I have experienced so far, because some of it I was like, I haven't experienced that. But it's almost like carrying the depth of anger and sadness of collective feminine energy that's been disrespected for so long. And that feeling is valid to say, oh, there's a whole lot to be mad about. And so for me, it was fascinating to witness and work through, because it's like you have the choice to figure out, okay, so what do you do with all of that? Because that depth is fuel. That depth is the electricity that we carry within ourselves. What do we do with it? How do we feel through it? Are we prepared? Do we know how to transmute it? To be productive. Yes, stuff does need to be destroyed, but it's valid to feel like we should just burn it all down. Are you still following? But we can be more productively destructive, more wholesomely destructive. And that requires a collaboration within ourselves and collectively to understand what seeds are we planting while we're also needing to burn it all down? What are we disentangling so we don't just create more voids with this energy? in art? And do we understand how to show up so we don't spiral in it or get so overwhelmed that we'll just shut it down again? That's what I'm talking about. Or that's what we continue talking about in this episode when we're speaking on feminine energy, where it's not necessarily about being pink or how to manipulate or confine it to only what to do with it in certain gender roles. It's more of how do we do better and be more skillful, maybe, in tapping into the beauty of our own duality to continue this shift that we're collectively experiencing. Again, the link is in my bio. It's also streaming wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, always happy to hear what you think. So share your thoughts in the comments, please. Thank you so much. Take care. I really appreciate you.